Shockwaves hit the monarchy as King Charles reportedly turned against Queen Camilla in a private, fiery speech. After a humiliating scene involving young Prince George, royal insiders say the king had enough. And now all eyes are on Kate, because the woman who stood silent may be the one who will rule next. An afternoon of royal joy turns tense. It was supposed to be a peaceful day. The spring sun cast a soft glow over Kensington Palace gardens as close family and aides gathered for a quiet garden party. The atmosphere buzzed with laughter and the smell of blooming roses. It was a rare moment where even the youngest royals could just be kids. Prince George held a vanilla strawberry swirl cone in his hand, his eyes shining. He looked proud, like this simple treat had made his whole afternoon. His sister, Princess Charlotte, was nearby, giggling as she pointed out a bee hovering near a daffodil. They were happy, relaxed, just two children enjoying a moment of calm. That calm didn't last. From the side entrance, Queen Camilla appeared, dressed in soft lilac, holding the hand of her grandson, Freddie Parker Bowles. Freddie looked restless. His feet shuffled as if he didn't want to be there, or was waiting for something to do. Even from a distance, his energy felt off. Unlike George and Charlotte, who were grounded and gentle, Freddie seemed ready to burst. The children were near the rose path, laughing together, when Camilla and Freddie approached. At first, no one paid much attention. Just another royal walk-by, or so it seemed. But what happened next turned an innocent spring day into a moment that would change royal family dynamics forever. Without saying a word, Freddie suddenly rushed forward. People thought he was just going to say hello, or maybe play. They were wrong. In the blink of an eye, everything shifted. Freddie didn't stop beside George. He didn't smile or greet him. Instead, he grabbed the ice cream cone straight out of George's hand. Just snatched it like it was his. He took a huge, messy bite, strawberry syrup dripping down his fingers. And then, in front of everyone, he dropped the rest of the cone onto the grass, deliberately. Gasps were heard. A few aides froze. Prince George just stood there, stunned. The joy in his face disappeared. His hand hung in the air where the cone had been just seconds ago. He looked down at the pink and white splatter on the grass, like he couldn't believe what just happened. And neither could anyone else. The palace lawn, moments earlier filled with giggles and calm chatter, now felt heavy, silent, eyes turned toward the children, toward Camilla. But she didn't rush in. She didn't correct Freddie. Instead, she chuckled and moved along as if nothing serious had happened. For George, that cone was more than dessert. It was his moment. And now, it was gone, in front of the very people he'd someday lead. And this was only the beginning. Ice cream theft, everyone saw. The moment Freddie reached for George's cone, it was like time stopped. 1 second, Prince George was smiling, his small hand holding that swirl of strawberry and vanilla like it was treasure. The next, it was ripped away. Freddie didn't even look at George. He just took the cone, chomped into it like it was his, and let the rest fall carelessly to the ground. The cone landed with a soft thud on the palace lawn. But the sound it made in everyone's heart, much louder. George stood frozen. His face dropped, his proud moment stolen. Not just the ice cream, but the joy that came with it. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't playful. It was something darker, something mean. Charlotte was just a few steps away. She turned and saw the mess on the grass, the dripping cream on Freddie's fingers, and her brother's shocked expression. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Her eyes said it all. Nearby staff saw it too. They hesitated. Should they step in, say something? But they didn't. They stood in that awkward space, caught between duty and fear. Because this wasn't just a normal family squabble. It was Camilla's grandson and the future King of England. George didn't cry at first. He didn't yell. He didn't run to his parents. He just stood there, silently processing what had happened. That made it worse. That made it heartbreaking. Then slowly, his lips began to tremble. His eyes welled up, the way a child fights tears when they're too proud to break down. He blinked fast, trying to stay strong. But his heart was cracked, and it showed. He wiped his cheek with his sleeve, quietly, hoping no one saw. But everyone saw. And while some might say it was just a child being a child, what made it so cruel was how clear Freddie's intent had been. He didn't ask for a lick or take a playful bite. He took it with force, destroyed it, and walked off like nothing mattered. This wasn't about ice cream anymore. This was about respect. And for the first time, Prince George learned a lesson not even Buckingham Palace could protect him from. Not everyone plays fair. As the cone melted into the earth, so did George's mood. The party carried on. Adults chatted, flowers swayed. But for one little boy in white shoes, a beautiful day had turned cold. And the next move would only make things worse. George's silent tears begin. After Freddie dropped the ice cream, George didn't speak. He just stared. His small hands were now empty. His favorite treat lay crushed on the grass. The smile that had lit up his face was completely gone. And though he didn't cry right away, his silence was louder than any scream. Charlotte stood beside him, frozen, her hands clenched into little fists. She didn't know what to do. No one did. The moment was heavy, awkward, too painful for words. A few aides nearby exchanged worried looks. But again, no one stepped in. No one wanted to interrupt, to make things worse, or, more importantly, to challenge Camilla's grandson. George's bottom lip trembled. His eyes filled with tears, but he kept his chin up. He tried to hold it in. He blinked and looked away, not wanting anyone to see. He used his sleeve to wipe his face quickly. But it was too late. His small heartbreak was now on full display. One aide later whispered, "It was like watching a crown crack." This wasn't about being dramatic. George wasn't throwing a tantrum. He didn't whine. He didn't lash out. He was just hurt and trying to carry it the way he's been taught. To be strong, to be royal. But he was still a child who'd just been humiliated in front of everyone. The sadness didn't leave his face as he turned to walk away. But the humiliation, that was only just beginning. The shoe-stomping humiliation. Just as George began to take a step back from the crowd, quiet, slow, and defeated, Freddie moved again. This time there were no laughs, no giggles. With a quick stomp, Freddie stepped on George's white shoes, grinding one into the mud beneath them. The loud squish was followed by a gasp. Brown streaks smeared across the leather, leaving deep scuff marks. George stopped dead. He looked down at the mess, his once clean shoes now ruined. The scuffs stood out like bruises on white. For a second, George didn't move. His eyes didn't leave his shoes. Then he looked up. Around him, aides covered their mouths in shock. One older guest whispered to her friend, Did he really just do that? He did. And it wasn't an accident. Freddie didn't apologize. He didn't look back. He just walked off again, as if nothing had happened, as if stepping on the heir's shoes was just a game. George looked around, searching. Still, no one spoke. Still, no adult had come to his defense. But someone was about to. Charlotte tries to protect her brother. Without saying a word, Charlotte moved. She dropped to her knees beside George and gently held one of his scuffed shoes. Using the hem of her pale blue dress, she began to wipe it, her small hands careful and calm. She didn't mind the mud. She didn't care about her dress. She only cared about her brother. "Don't worry," she whispered, just loud enough for George to hear. Her voice was soft, steady. She was trying to hold him together when everything else was falling apart. George still didn't speak. He stood frozen, breathing shallowly, trying not to cry again. An aide rushed over with napkins, but George didn't take them. He just shook his head and looked away. His pride was bruised far more than his shoes. Charlotte looked up at Freddie, who stood near a patch of tulips, completely unbothered. Her stare was sharp, cold, fierce, protective, the kind of look only a sister can give. And though she didn't say anything, that glare said it all. "Touch him again, and you'll answer to me." Charlotte didn't cry. She didn't break. In that moment, she became George's shield. And somewhere across the garden, someone else saw it all happen. Queen Camilla laughs it off. Camilla saw it, every single part of it. From the ice cream theft to the stomped shoes, she was standing close enough to step in, but she didn't. Instead, she smiled lightly and gave a small laugh. Not of concern, not of surprise, but a soft chuckle, like it was some silly child's play. "Oh, Freddie, cheeky boy," she reportedly said, waving her hand as if the entire thing was harmless mischief. But it wasn't harmless. Not to George, not to Charlotte, not to the aides who couldn't believe what they'd just witnessed. Camilla's reaction landed with a thud. A queen consort brushing off cruelty as if it meant nothing. She didn't call Freddie over. She didn't apologize to George. She didn't check if he was. Okay. There was no glance of worry, no effort to make peace. Just a shrug, a smile, and the day moved on, for her. But across the lawn, a mother's eyes were watching. Kate had seen everything. Standing beneath a blossom-covered trellis, she had been speaking to a guest when her gaze shifted. First to George's ice cream, then to the muddy shoes, then to her daughter kneeling beside her son, and finally to Camilla, laughing. That was the moment Kate stopped pretending. The warmth drained from her face, her lips pressed tight. And while she didn't storm over or raise her voice, her silence became a storm of its own. What Camilla saw as a cheeky prank, Kate saw as disrespect. And that difference would cost more than a garden party. William immediately steps in. The moment William realized what had happened, he didn't wait. He walked straight across the lawn, cutting through the laughter and chatter, heading for his children. His eyes locked on George, his little boy, looking broken. He didn't say a word to anyone around him. He knelt beside George, reached out, and gently wiped the tear that had streaked down his cheek. Then he looked into his eyes, whispering something only George could hear. Whatever he said, it worked. George gave a small nod. But William's expression changed the second he turned his head. He looked toward Freddie, and then toward Camilla. His eyes were sharp now, cold. He didn't speak to either of them. He didn't need to. The look on his face said it all. You crossed a line. He stood, placed a steady hand on George's shoulder, and led him away from the rose path. There was no public scolding, no raised voice, just a quiet but firm act of a father who'd had enough. Kate saw them coming and immediately stepped toward George, wrapping her arms around him. At that moment, the Wales family became one unit, tight, silent, unshakable. And Camilla? She stayed where she was, unbothered, detached. But the chill in the air told everyone watching, this wasn't over. Kate's disapproval is cold but controlled. Kate didn't need to raise her voice. Her silence said more than words ever could. As George leaned into her embrace, Charlotte stood close, still glaring at Freddie from across the lawn. Kate brushed George's hair back, whispering gently to calm him. Then she took Charlotte's hand and gave her a small squeeze. But her eyes were locked, stone cold, on one person, Camilla. She didn't speak to her. She didn't even glance long enough to pretend there was civility. Her face stayed still, poised, but furious beneath the surface. A nearby aide tried to offer comfort, but Kate simply shook her head. Her expression didn't change, but she spoke quietly. Just one line. One moment. Enough is enough. Those 3 words said everything. She didn't want to argue. She didn't want to escalate. But something had snapped. For years, Kate had played the role of peacemaker, smiling, nodding, avoiding palace drama for the sake of the crown. But seeing her son humiliated, publicly and without any defense from Camilla, that changed something. She was done staying silent. And from that moment forward, the line between their families wasn't just visible. It was etched into the palace grounds. Camilla defends Freddie. Privately. Behind closed doors, whispers flew fast. Palace aides reported that Queen Camilla was quick to downplay the entire scene. In a private conversation with a family advisor, she reportedly said, "He's just energetic. You know how boys are." But that word didn't sit well. Not with anyone who had witnessed what happened. Camilla didn't call Freddie in for a talk. She didn't make him apologize. Instead, she doubled down. When told that George had been visibly upset, her reply was stunning. George is just being too sensitive. The air inside the palace grew cold. Advisors began choosing their words more carefully. The energy around Camilla shifted. No one dared challenge her directly. But behind the scenes, loyalty was quietly shifting. The Wales team, Kate and William's inner circle, grew noticeably more protective. Camilla's refusal to take responsibility only added fuel to a growing fire. This wasn't just a child misbehaving. It was a pattern, and one that Camilla refused to acknowledge. Even some of her own aides seemed uncomfortable. One was overheard saying, "If it were the other way around, George would be punished immediately." The divide was growing. And Camilla? She didn't seem to care. But someone else did. And he was about to act. William confronts Charles. Quietly. Later that evening, long after the guests had left and the children had been taken inside, William requested a private word with his father. The mood was tense. They met in a quiet study where old portraits of monarchs looked down from the walls. William didn't shout. He didn't accuse. But his words carried a weight that Charles couldn't ignore. He explained what had happened step by step. He spoke of George's hurt, of Charlotte stepping in, of Kate's disappointment, and above all, of Camilla's silence. Charles listened, but he looked tired, caught between loyalty and responsibility. He reportedly said, "Camilla didn't mean harm." But William cut in, calm but firm. "But she caused it." That hit hard. For the first time in a long while, Charles found himself unable to defend both sides. He didn't apologize, not officially, but his eyes said it all. He knew something had gone wrong. William left the study without any promises made, but one thing was clear. He had drawn the line. His children would be protected, no matter what. And Camilla? Her actions now had consequences inside the palace walls. George refuses to return to garden events. In the days that followed, the palace tried to carry on. But George didn't. Something in him had shifted, subtle but unmistakable. When aides suggested another family garden event was coming up, he quietly asked his mother, "Will he be there again?" The "he" needed no explanation. Kate paused, unsure how to answer. She knelt beside him, brushed his cheek with her hand, and gave a soft, reassuring smile. But the question stayed with her. From that day on, George began to avoid outdoor family gatherings. Not with tantrums or demands, but with quiet resistance. He simply didn't want to go. When asked why, he would say, "I don't like those days anymore." Even at school, teachers noticed he was quieter, a little less engaged, more thoughtful than usual. Word was quietly passed through the proper channels. Staff were told to be gentle with him, to watch for signs of emotional strain. It wasn't about the ice cream anymore. It was about trust. The garden had once been his happy place, a space where he could laugh, run, and feel safe. Now, it reminded him of stolen joy, of dirty shoes, of being laughed at by the Queen. George didn't want to return. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Public sympathy grows for George. The story was never officially released, but the palace isn't a fortress for secrets. Within weeks, whispers became rumors, and rumors became headlines. It started on royal forums. Someone from the staff, perhaps, had said just enough for curious ears to catch on. Soon, the phrase "Poor George" began trending in quiet corners of the internet. Parenting groups shared posts. Royal watchers exchanged shocked messages. People were outraged. How could Camilla just watch and do nothing? Why wasn't Freddie corrected? Where were the adults? The tone was clear. Sympathy surged for George. He wasn't being painted as a spoiled prince, but as a child who had been publicly humiliated and left unsupported. Parenting experts weighed in, calling the event a moment that should have been addressed immediately, not brushed off with a chuckle. Camilla's image took a hit. Though there was no official statement, public opinion didn't need one. It was loud and clear. You protect children, especially when they're hurting. Royal commentators began to tread carefully. Some avoided the topic altogether. Others tried to defend it. But the majority knew better. This wasn't just palace gossip anymore. This was a reputation slipping quietly through the cracks. Charlotte becomes his fiercest protector. Since that garden party, Charlotte hasn't left George's side. At public events, she stays close to him, almost like a bodyguard in a princess dress. She watches the crowd carefully. Her eyes are sharper now, more aware. Palace aides began calling her something behind closed doors. His shadow and his sword. And they weren't wrong. Charlotte had always been confident, bold, but now she was fiercely protective. Anytime Freddie was nearby, her posture changed. She stood taller, her jaw tensed, and if he came too close, she gently moved in front of George. It wasn't about revenge. It was about love. Kate noticed it right away. One afternoon, she took Charlotte aside and said, "You're very brave." Charlotte looked up and answered simply, "He's my brother." That was all she needed to say. Since that day, the bond between George and Charlotte has only grown stronger. They share knowing glances during royal outings. George leans toward her when cameras flash, and she stands like a silent shield, elegant but unbreakable. In a family built on legacy, it was sibling loyalty that stole the spotlight. Camilla's favoritism now questioned. For those who knew the palace well, this wasn't Camilla's first misstep. Freddie had caused small problems before, interrupting speeches, shouting during official photos, even once knocking over a flower display during a family walkabout. Each time, Camilla laughed it off. Each time she said the same thing. "He's just spirited." But this time was different. This time, people saw the cost. The favoritism wasn't just a whisper anymore. It was being called out, quietly but firmly. Behind the scenes, questions began swirling. Why was Freddie allowed to act out? Why were Camilla's grandkids treated with more lenience? One staffer put it plainly, "She plays favorites. Everyone knows it." Even insiders who once defended her began stepping back. It wasn't about disliking Freddie. It was about how his behavior hurt others, and how Camilla's response made things worse. People began watching her more closely. Every move she made was now seen through a sharper lens. Her words, her choices, even her silences. None of it could hide the growing divide, and pressure was mounting. The Queen Consort could no longer laugh it off. A moment that changed royal dynamics. That single afternoon, what started with a stolen cone ended in a silent revolution. It wasn't a scandal. It wasn't a public fallout. It was something deeper. George's tears exposed more than bad behavior. They exposed where the lines had been drawn. For William and Kate, the message was clear. Their children would come first. Always. Since then, they've made quiet changes. Family events are now carefully planned. George, Charlotte, and Louis are given protected spaces where they can feel safe, where trust isn't broken. Their emotional well-being is being guarded more than ever. Insiders say William became more vocal in family meetings, Kate more firm in setting boundaries, and Charles? He began listening. The crown may still rest on his head, but the Wales family is rising in strength. United, protective, unapologetically focused on the future. The garden party was meant to be a moment of spring joy. Instead, it became a turning point, one that redrew royal power in silence. And from now on, one thing is certain: George's dignity will never be overlooked again. As palace halls grow colder and eyes shift toward the future, one truth is clear. Camilla's grip is slipping, and Kate's reign of quiet strength has begun. Behind every royal smile now lies a silent power struggle. And if the king has spoken, then the real queen might already be in waiting.